I'm ready to go.
Right
Yep,
on. Jason, wonderful to meet you, sir. Thank you for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
sure.
So, before we get into your work, I want to know this first and foremost. 5 years ago, this pandemic was entering all kinds of different phases. It was already confusing to begin with. So, ultimately, how did you survive the global pandemic, and how has it reverberated into the work that you do today?
That's funny. I didn't know what to do when the pandemic hit.
Yeah,
Um, you know, I, the world ended, as we knew it.
yeah,
And um, so I had this e-commerce business where I was selling replacement parts mainly for HVAC units. But a lot of a lot of other stuff. But that was kind of the main thing. And what I didn't see or predict, or I don't know, like I work with some guys that are like stuff happens and they're like, oh, this is what's going to happen next, and we can make a lot of money this way. No, I'm not one of those guys.
yeah,
Uh, so I just like did nothing and like remodeled my kitchen.
yeah.
The thing that happened was is that everybody started doing more DIY stuff, and I made a whole lot of money just by doing nothing
Yeah.
because people were just buying. They were home, so they were buying more of my products. So, um, but that business for me was a very stressful business.
Yeah.
Selling for Amazon or selling as a third party Amazon seller, that was extremely stressful. And so while the money was good, um, as the pandemic wound down, um, and that was kind of the other consequence of the pandemic, is I had a lot more competition because there was a lot more people working from home all of a sudden. So that competition, combined with some lawsuits Amazon had lost, really started cutting in to my sales. And so I was working to get out of it, and then in July of 2022, um, I was just I didn't realize the stress that I was under, and then just one more thing, kind of a big thing happened, and it just was just that thing that just crushed me.
Yeah.
Like I just fell into depression, and I just couldn't go on uh, any longer. So that is actually what, kind of the path that got me into the work that I'm doing now. Because to get myself out of that, I had to change my pattern of thinking, and I needed help to do that. So, from that really dark space, I, went and sought out, I I didn't want the pill. I didn't want to take the pill, the antidepressant. There wasn't much help available for me. So I really had to go find the tools and techniques for changing my patterns of thinking to be able to resolve what was going on inside my brain. But once I went down that road, things happened very quickly. Like, um, what I learned in a day caused my depression to go away, and never came back.
Yeah.
And so, the e-commerce thing, I was like, oh, working twice as hard for half the money. Um, I was always looking for that thing, what is it that I'm meant to do? What would really, what would make my heart sing? And the more that I got into the work that I was doing with Dr. Joe Dispenza, the more I was like, man, I really love this stuff. And I started attending live events. I got recruited to train his work in businesses and organizations. So the very same things that I had used to pull myself out, I was now getting to use to help businesses and organizations to have more cohesive cultures, to have better teamwork, to reduce burnout, reduce turnover, increase productivity, increase collaboration and communication, to produce a better result for their clients, or for whoever it is that they serve. And for me, that's the work that I love to do. I believe that at our core, at our greatest, human beings, we're creators, and that when we are creating, we are fulfilling our purpose, in humanity. So whether as that's to invent something that, makes people's lives better, that solves a problem, or just opens up the world for people. When we're in our creative state, that's when we're at our best. That's when we can help each other the most. And so I love being in this place where I'm trained to help people to get out of stress and into a creative state where they can be on purpose, where they can be living at their best or doing their best. So,
Yeah, that makes sense. So let me ask you this. When you were a kid, like say 12 years old, what did you want to be when you grew up? What was your dream life?
oh, well, I remember when I was 5, I wanted to be either a garbage man or a fireman.
Yeah.
Um, at 12, boy, I don't know. At
Well,
12, I don't think I was even thinking about that at all. I don't think I was thinking about, what I wanted to be, when I grew up. Um, and certainly, in high school, I had no clue.
yeah.
I absolutely had no clue. I graduated and early so that I could be a ski instructor up in Tahoe with no plan as to what I was going to do when the spring came. I was just going to find something. So, looking back, and I was so stubborn. you know, Looking back, there was just I just had no purpose or direction. My purpose was I was gonna have as much fun as I could.
Yeah.
Um, and I would take whatever job came along that would pay me the most money. That was my criteria. Um, which, didn't work out so well.
Yeah.
So, it was very much, just a hand to mouth existence, of trying to make it from paycheck to paycheck. I end up kind of getting into my dad's industry. He was in the hot tub and fireplace industry, above ground pools, things like that. So I ended up getting into that industry, and within a few years, I hit my income ceiling. I wasn't going to make any more money doing that.
Yeah.
So, um, but the whole e-commerce thing, because I had these wholesale relationships where I was buying these products that I was using, to fix people's stuff. Essentially an appliance repairman, um, but just hot tubs and pools and gas fireplaces, pellet stoves, things like that. So just one day, I keep this on my desk to remind me. I I use this motor all the time. 90% of the product I was working on was using this motor. And so I said, I wonder if anybody would want to do it themselves. Like if I put this on eBay, would anybody buy it? And so sure enough, I put it up on eBay, and I started selling half dozen a week. Um and fast forward, 2008, with the crash and all that that happened, that became my full-time business.
Yeah.
And, I ended up selling millions of dollars of product in e-commerce.
Yeah.
But I never liked it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I never liked what I was doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So who's been a hero? Who's been that inspiration for you to power through and find this place as the stress interventionist? Who has been that hero for you?
Well, I think that there's been a few. Um, in my early 20s, I got introduced to Napoleon Hill and Jim Rohn, and there that somebody gave me a CD by Jim Rohn. Um, and I listened to that CD, I don't know how many times, just over and over again. And I was actually thinking about that more this morning because so much of what Jim Rohn talked about was his philosophy. What was his philosophy? And I was at a friend's house last night, uh, he was talking to my kids, and I didn't know this about him, but of how deep he was into martial arts, and that he had at one time he had like 15 dojos that he was running, that he worked for the police department as for conflict resolution, with Asian gangs, things like that. And so he was like teaching principle number one, which was peace. So here he's a martial artist, but he's teaching, you know, being peaceable is his number one principle.
Yeah.
And I thought about that, and I was like, what's my philosophy on life and on business? I kind of I feel like I'm in this place in my mid 40s where I'm like, you know, getting beyond being, I don't I want to I don't this might not sound right, but getting beyond being the perpetual student, always learning, always learning, always learning, but missing the next step, which is, giving what I've learned, actually developing a philosophy on business, a philosophy on life, and actually saying, okay, this is my core philosophy. This is how I operate. That was, Jim Rohn was known as the world's foremost business philosopher. So I think there's just kind of moments in life where I have to go back and say, well, wait a second, I didn't get this because I'm not doing with this what I could be doing with this.
Yeah.
And I need to be better. I got my kids are I'm like, oh gosh, my kids are 14 and 15 years old and I haven't taught them a philosophy. Jim, what did I do? So he was really impactful, but another guy who was really impactful was Bernie Dorman.
Yeah.
Bernie Dorman had this organization called CEO Space, and his philosophy was the philosophy of cooperation. That we got so much more done in cooperation than we would in competition. That when we compete with each other, everybody loses. We don't get far when we compete with each other, but when we cooperate, even if we're in the same business, we can, say, okay, how can we work together? What are you really great at? What am I really great at? We're not going to be great at the same thing. And how can I drive business to the thing that you do really, really well, or the part of the business you do really well? And, you do the same for me. So we can both be plumbers and we can both thrive in the
Yeah.
same community with the same pool of customers. His message was really attractive in that he he put on events where some of the most famous people, in the business world, showed up. Tony Robbins was coming to him to figure out how to crack into, you know, large groups of 2,000 people or more. Um, Jack Canfield, Lisa Nichols, Bob Proctor, all these names were showing up there, and so I got to meet all these people and talk to them and have conversations with them, and that made a huge difference for me because it took away like the star shock, of people. I could just walk up to somebody, you know um like the woman who co-authored Rich Dad Poor Dad with Robert Kiyosaki was Sharon Lechter,
Yeah.
and I could just go up to Sharon and just have a conversation with her, and so that's where that's helping me out now is with my consulting work is being able to have conversations with CEOs and
Yeah.
people that are really high up in their companies, or that are in leadership, and I'm just not scared to have the conversation with them. And I think if it wasn't for Bernie, I wouldn't have, you know, I wouldn't have that confidence.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. How do you separate what you do with your work of helping people get through their stress and find a better place in their lives, and to also take care of yourself? How do you wake up every day doing both of those at the best of your abilities? Is there a philosophy of balance? How do you do it?
Um, I'm I'm ultimately doing what I'm teaching people to do, but I'm doing it on a deeper level. I what I teach um is is more of an introductory, type of process into neuroscience, and how the brain body work together, and then how do we change from an old personality that's not producing the results that we want it to produce, and how do we change into a new personality that does produce the results that we want to produce, and what are those results that we're going after? When I work with companies, that's what we're doing. We're literally transforming the personality of the individuals inside the company, which transforms the personality of the company. You know, um, and we use a process of mental rehearsal or meditation to help people change themselves on a subconscious level. We're literally reprogramming the brain. And so, my process um, goes a little on a deeper side with that. Where I'm usually so when the kind of the core principle, or core philosophy number one with Jason Munson, I was thinking of this morning is there's the thing that Jesus said. He says, "Put the kingdom first, and all these other things will be added to you." So I start out in the morning and I pray. You know, I kind of get lost in prayer. I kind of pray about every facet of my life, and what I understand God's will to be. Um, and then after that, I do a guided meditation that's usually anywhere from 45 minutes to over an hour long, where I'm sitting, with my noise canceling earphones on, and I'm got my eyes closed, and I'm have learned how to slow my brain waves down, into that theta brainwave state where I'm suggestible. And then, the meditation might just be like, so what would greatness look like today? How would a master show up? How can I connect with the frequency of abundance, freedom, and opportunity? And what would it feel like, if everything that I wanted was already happening? And just live into that future, live into that reality. So, um, doing that is is crucial for me because the world has just gotten crazier and crazier and crazier, and people are more stressed out than they've ever been before. And I found that one of my jobs, sometimes the best thing I can do to help somebody is just give them a space to vent and to just listen and let them know that they're being heard. And sometimes just getting all the bluster out is the thing that they need. And so with that, kind of to your, to the, I think part of the point of your question is, how do you stay positive when you're dealing with a lot of negativity? Or when you're around people that have negativity or that they have negative problems, like how do you stay, how do you take care of yourself? Um, you know, I think that the other thing that Jesus said, the second greatest commandment is to love your neighbor as yourself. Well, if you don't love yourself, you're not going to be very good at loving your neighbor. So you got to put on your own oxygen mask first before you can take care of somebody else. And having the process that I've learned and been able to develop into my day is what it it's what keeps me on that positive path of feeling love and gratitude in my heart. So I spend the day being connected to gratitude, love, joy, and peace, which are the highest frequency emotions that you can be connected with. And then I look for the synchronicities. I look for the things that show up in my life that match the frequency, the energy, and the emotion that I've been connecting to. And I look for it in the people that I help. And so when somebody's freaking out, I just have a big smile on my face and I'm just feeling love for that person.
Yeah. So let me ask you this: of everything that you've done and evolved into at this point in your life, what are you the proudest of?
Oh boy. I'm the proudest of. I've got a lot of things to be proud of. I think right now, um, and again, it's like this, you know, years ago, this wouldn't be a thing. This would be more common. Um, and it wouldn't, it wouldn't be something to be so proud of. But I think that these days, um, with stress, how it breaks up people in their relationships. In October, we're going to celebrate our 20th wedding anniversary. And I'm super proud of that, because, so many people have not crossed that line,
Yeah.
you know. Um, and I always think it's really interesting when you have, um, when you have coaches, when you have mentors, when you have facilitators that are, um, teaching about relationship and, and they're divorced. So you're trying to tell me how to do the thing that you weren't able to do, you know. And so when I look at mentors, my mentor, Dave Meltzer, you know, still married, tells the story about how he almost lost it, you know, how he almost messed it up, and ruined the relationship. But, I don't know how many years he's probably got to be close to 30, years married. Joe Dispenza, uh, you know, the guy that I work for now, incredibly successful. And if you go to one of his events, you got 2,000 people will be there at a week-long training, and 80% of them or more are women, and they're absolutely gorgeous. And he certainly could have, the pick, um, of whatever woman that he wanted, and yet, he's been married and faithful and loyal to his wife for decades. So I'm very, and I had my fair stupidity, to where, it could have ended, you
Yeah.
know, and I married this woman who's very tolerant and understanding and compassionate, so as long as I'm willing to work at it, she's willing to work at it. And we're in this space now of, it's like we've been married for 20 years, and we just love spending time together. She's
Yeah.
my favorite person to go spend time with.
Yeah.
You would think we'd be tired of each other by now, but no, we have a great time together. So yeah, very proud of that. I'm also proud of my sons. My biological son is Xavier. He's 14. I adopted my biological nephew, who's now 15, and so having a family, I I'm very proud of that. And I guess, that's, for people who don't have families, who didn't go that route, that didn't happen for them. I guess, maybe that may not seem, uh, all that exceptional. I don't know, because you're not there. But when you've worked at for something for 20 years and you're having success with it, I think it's, for me, I'm very proud of that.
It's exceptional. It's hard work. I totally get it. So if anyone out there is peaked enough and they want stress relief, they want to ask any questions, they want to hire you, any of the good business, where's the best place to go?
Go to meetwithjason.net.
Okay.
That'll get you right to my calendar. You can book an appointment with me, there. Um, Yeah, that's the best way to get in touch with me. If you want to just browse my stuff a little bit more, you can go to neurolinkers.com, and neuro is spelled Neuro, linkers.com. And I'll get you a little bit more insight into the world and how I can support and help you and with your team in creating that thriving, cohesive culture that everybody wants to have inside their business. That's having a positive impact on the world ultimately. How can we do something that makes the world a better place?
Absolutely. I will put all the links in the show notes. Jason, this has been wonderful. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your story. Continued success.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Hello, friends. Joe Dimino here. I just wanted to let you know that after 30 years or so, I have finally released my first book of poetry through the mighty Spartan Press here in Kansas City, Missouri. As the creator and host of both Neon Jazz Radio and the famous Interviews with Joe Dimino podcast, along with being a visual artist, I'm ready to embark on a new adventure and want you to be a part of it. You can get a copy online via Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and actually on the streets in Kansas City at the great Prospero's bookstore off 39th Street. You can also visit joedimino.com for links to the book, to more poetry, and everything in my world, including paintings. Thanks for all of the love and support over the years, and please dig the words.